How's it going, chasers? I hope you're having a kick-ass week. I just had a really interesting discussion with one of the Patreons who's relatively new to distilling. He had some issues that I helped him work through. I think it's something that new distillers would benefit from listening to. But I also have a few pointers on how experienced distillers can help newbies in these sorts of situations. Welcome Distiller everyone, I'm Jesse and this is the channel all about chasing the craft of home distillation and making it a legitimate hobby. I want you guys to go back and remember, if you're experienced in distilling, and if you're not, think about a different hobby. I want you to go back and think of when you first started this hobby and how freaking hard it was to get a grasp on it. There's so many different things, and if you don't come from something like home brewing or cheese making even, something that lets you know about fermentation or braising or something related to the hobby, how hard it is to, it's like reaching through a fog trying to grab something that's just constantly moving away from you. I know I felt like that, and honestly sometimes I still do. As more experienced home distillers, I think it's really, really important for the community, if you want to be part of the community, and I think you should be, to remember what that's like so you can have some compassion and some understanding when you're helping out the new guys. Now, new guys, it's also important that you do some research and try and help us out as well, you know, like that it's not one of those hobbies that we can just serve everything up on a platter for you and you can go away and get started. You need to put some time in yourself as well. Now, it was very, very obvious that Ryan, the guy that I was talking to, had done this. He's done some research, he's, you know, done a bit of work himself, and he just run into a problem. I think that it's going to be best to sort of step through the conversation we had in the order we had it to help the new guys and the experienced guys come together on these sorts of things, okay? So, this is what Ryan said when he first got in touch with me. He'd made a whiskey with corn, 70% corn, 30% barley, and distilled it on an air still, and he was getting some off flavors. So I want you to have a quick think if you're an experienced distiller and think about what you would say back to someone asking you this question right away. I see so often, especially on Facebook, not so much on the forums, but definitely on Facebook, someone asks a question like this and straight away you get 10 people jumping in offering advice on how to fix the problem. Now the problem with this is that this is such a freaking complex hobby. How can you possibly know how to help Ryan in that situation? You can't, there's no way. There is so many variables that could be affecting a off flavor in a whiskey made with an air still. That's the only information we have. So when I see people doing this, I kind of feel like there's one of probably 3 reasons that they do this. One is that they're just they're eager to help and they're not entirely comfortable with how the process of problem solving plays out. Does that make sense? They're really trying to be helpful, but they're just they're jumping in before they've really figured out what's going on. 2 is that they're just completely ignorant to what's going on and they're just talking without thinking. That might be happening. Or number 3 is that they're trying to grab brownie points and be the one to solve the problem first. And I think that happens a little bit as well. I do like to think that generally it's the first reason, but I don't know. So, for the experienced distillers, get information before you start throwing around solutions. A solution that is no help to the problem whatsoever is just a wild goose chase, and that can waste days, months of someone's life chasing something down that's got nothing to do with the problem they have. For the new distillers, please guys, remember to give us as much information as you can. And I know this is really hard because you don't know what's relevant. I get that. I would rather see someone that's put some time and effort into writing a proper question than someone that's just slapped something out there and hoping everyone to solve it for them. That's not what Ryan was doing at all. The reason I kept talking to him is because he's a cool guy and I enjoy talking to him. We talked a little bit more and we found out that he was comparing it to Suntory whiskey. That made me question right away because obviously Suntory, I'm guessing, I don't know, but I'm guessing isn't made with a whole lot of corn. If any corn, and it's just totally different product to something that's been distilled from 70% corn. New distillers, let's talk expectations. I know you see in the forums and on the Facebook page about how home distilling is going to make booze that's 100 times better than any commercial product you've ever had. It can, for sure. I've had some amazing products made from home distillers, especially when it comes to white spirits. Brown spirits, on the other hand, especially single malt, oh my word, that's tricky. That gets real tricky, especially if you're trying to do it cheating time. So Don't think that the first time you make something it's going to be better than the big guys make, because if it was, people would be doing that and they'd be making a shit ton of money. I'm not trying to bring you down. I'm not trying to say that it's not possible, because it is possible. It's totally possible. But I also don't want you to get completely and utterly discouraged when the thing you make is not as good as the bottle that you've bought from the store. That being said, Ryan was tasting a specific flavor in his spirit that he didn't like. That's a good thing. If you give me a specific flavor, or a experienced distiller, hopefully someone more experienced than me, if you give them a specific flavor that you want more of or less of, then we can help you with that. Here's the thing. I can't taste his whiskey. So we have to communicate. We have to talk about flavors, and we have to talk about how they present and what they might remind you of in order to try and get on the same page. I know some people in the home distilling world think that all this, you know, I don't have a Glencairn next to me to be extra wanky, but all this smelling and sniffing and swirling and sipping and adding water to it and pontificating and talking about shit and all these crazy different flavors that we smell and taste. I know that people think that's wankery, pretentious, and bullshit. I get it. I understand it. If all you want to do is just sit there and enjoy your spirit, you kind of got a point, right? But in this situation, we're trying to talk through the internet about his problem, right? That means that we have to do that. I can't help someone figure out what's wrong with their spirit if I can't picture the flavor in my head. So I started asking questions, and I got a little bit more out of him. He said that it was almost, it reminded him like spoilt food. That's interesting to me. That's really interesting to me, because that takes it from a whole wheel of flavors that it could be and narrows it down to a more specific kind of sector that could be heading in. We dug a little bit more, talked back and forth. Is it like kind of overripe banana? Is it something like that? Is it more like wet dog and toe jams? Or is it straight up like rotting meat? Ryan said that it was much more like the wet dog and toe jams, and that it actually reminded him of a fish pond, which is a freaking awesome descriptor. As soon as someone says something like that, if you've been near a fish pond, if you spent any sort of time around a fish pond, you're going to have a memory of that, right? Of course, perhaps your memory and someone else's memory are two slightly different things, but it gets you in a ballpark real quick. Now we've got something that is much more specific, and straight away my mind went to two different things. One is I have never used an ear still, so I can't comment specifically on it, but I know that generally the smaller volumes and the distillation method that they use is not the best necessarily. I also know that sometimes they're made out of questionable materials and that sort of thing. And once I'd remembered those things about an ear still, two specific suggestions popped into my mind straight away. Number one, copper in the vapor path. Copper in general. Was there any copper anywhere near the spirit when it was distilled? New distillers, if you haven't come across this yet, you don't need it, but you kind of need it. Just put copper in the vapor path, please. You can use copper saddles, copper rashes, copper scrubbies, SPP made from copper. You can use 1,000 different things, but just please guys, remember that you need it to be copper, not some random mix or things smushed together or plated, or just copper, cool? Anyway, the copper is in there to help remove some of the more sulfury, pungent flavors that are in the wash that can carry over into the final product. Now, when I say remove, that is misleading. It doesn't remove them, it converts those compounds into other things, and it also aids in the process of esterification, where acids, alcohol, oxygen come together in the presence of heat and copper and change into an ester. The esters are responsible for some of the lighter, sort of fruitier, uplifting, fun flavors in whiskey. So you take those fun flavors out and you add this pungent, meaty, sulfury sort of flavor back in, and it can be pretty freaking rank if there's too much of it. Turns out that Ryan got back to me and said that yes, actually this was the last run that he'd done before he bought copper scrubbies and put them into the still, and he just hadn't thought about the fact that was when he changed it. It's easy to do, guys, trust me. I wouldn't say that necessarily means that that's what the problem is, but it does definitely improve the chances of that guess being right. The other thing that it could be is tails, right? Wet dog, fish pond. I would say that definitely reminds me of tails. And with a small volume still, and especially an air still, trying to get specific cuts is damn near impossible. He also mentioned that he was using 200ml jars to cut down because it was a small wash and so on and so forth. But 200 mils to 2 liters is, yeah, that's tricky, man. That's real hard. I get it. Some people, that's the tool that you've got to work with and you got to make the best of that situation. In that situation, I would suggest making washes that are much larger than your still, stripping them, you know, doing multiple stripping runs and then adding the low ones or the results of those stripping runs back into the small volume still, and at least that way you've effectively multiplied the size of your boiler by the amount of runs that you can fit back into it. Does that make sense? So let's say you've got a 2-liter pot. Instead of making a 2-liter wash, you make a 6 or an 8-liter wash. You run that through the still, you know, 3 or 4 times. You collect the stuff that comes back off. You proof it back down with water to at least 40% or lower. You pop it back into the still and then run it one more time as a spirit run. It doesn't make making cuts any easier, but it does give you better resolution on the cut. If your wash is this big and you need to cut 15% of the way into the run, you know, that's a pretty tight tolerance to be able to cut in the right spot. Whereas if you can make your run this big, now suddenly that point where you have to cut, you've got a bigger wiggle room, a bigger zone to cut in to be correct. I hope that makes sense. So I do need to say a huge freaking thank you to people just like Ryan, all of the Patreons that are basically they're the ones carrying this channel and making me forge forward. People like that, I can't thank them enough, guys. Thank you so much. I know that was a relatively specific video on a specific problem. If you would like to see more videos where we talk through a specific problem like we just did now, or we talk on a specific topic that you're not sure about, drop a comment down below. Let me know that you do want to see videos like that and give me some ideas on what we could potentially talk about. So I hope the video helped you guys, whether you be an advanced distiller or someone new to the hobby. I hope I've given you something to think about. If I did, make sure you give this video a thumbs up. That helps me out so much, so much. Hit the subscribe button down below if you haven't done so already. Share this video with people you think it might help. Keep on chasing the craft, and I'll see you next time.